Hello and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. So for this week's video, in honor of spooky season, I've decided to do a countdown of 10 of my favorite books to read for the season of the witch. It will have some crossover with last year's list of books that I recommend for the season of the witch, but in particular, this year's list is based on how you feel when you read the books, and it is on the whole image of being this enchantress, the sorceress who lives at the edge of the woods, but still at the edge of a small town, just at the edge of the woods. And she spends all day providing services to her community as a practicing witch, sorceress, enchantress, and her evenings in devotion and other magical workings for herself. But then late at night, she needs to take some time to just rest and relax. And she wants to read books that make her feel like her most romantic, witchy self, particularly like this Gothic heroine running through the halls of a haunted mansion or dancing on the moors as a ghost. And I chose 10 of my favorite books that give that vibe, and we're going to go through them. I do not have them ranked, and I just stacked them in order from smallest to largest size I have here. So not in any particular order, but this did bring my two favorite books of all time at the very top of the pile, which is The Phantom of the Opera, the first book I'm going to discuss. This is the Gaston Leroux classic, originally published in France in 1910 and then translated for the first time in English in 1911. And this one is not the 1911 translation. This is the Lowell Bear translation. And it is such a beautiful romantic translation, and it's a little more accurate than the first translation, which is a public domain translation. It's the most common one you'll get. But this one is definitely worth it, and it comes in this pretty little blue book. This is the Bantam Classics edition. It has this gorgeous painting, sort of inspired by the Weber musical, but it has its own energy about it. The Phantom is in full mask, which is pertaining to the book. The half mask thing was for the musical. And if you have not read it and you are a fan of the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical or of different adaptations, maybe you really love the Lon Chaney movie from 1925, definitely give it a read. I love Eric. We should all love Eric. He's awesome. And Christine is one great Gothic heroine who has more autonomy than your average Gothic heroine. She isn't just there kind of, oh, oops, this happened to me. She is actively participating in the story. She is wanting to be this great singer, and she's working towards that. And she's naive in trusting who she thinks is her angel of music, and turns out to be the Phantom. But she genuinely is focusing on that. And the idea of ever getting married is an afterthought, which is super interesting for a book published in this time period, and it's actually set like 30 years earlier than that. I love it. I love Christine as a character. Yes, she's she's a maiden, and yes, she's naive, but she grows a lot, and I've always wished her and Eric could have made it work, which is why I also love a lot of the fan fiction retellings and continuation books, which lets that happen. So yes, Phantom of the Opera. My other favorite book of all time, which is my favorite 19th century novel, my favorite novel in the English language, and my favorite Victorian novel all rolled into one, is Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. And this is my favorite copy of it. I got it last year for my birthday, 2022. And this is the Chiltern Press edition of the book. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I just recently found out that they are releasing Chiltern Press is releasing an edition of Phantom of the Opera at the end of November. So I've already told my husband that I really, really want that for the holidays because these are just gorgeous. Gilt edges. The paper is shiny and thick and absolutely beautiful, beautiful editions. So, Wuthering Heights is the tale of Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff, childhood sweethearts who become embroiled in this love triangle. Even though they're soulmates, she marries someone else, he marries that man's sister, and things get chaotic from there. But it has all the things you could ever want. It has romance on the moors, it has a dark, tortured love story, and it has hauntings, because Catherine's a ghost throughout a big portion of the novel. It's incredible. I cannot highly recommend this book enough. Now, the next book is the one that probably everyone assumes is going to be on this list, because you can't, well, one of two, there's another one down here that I'm sure everyone assumes is on the list too, but one of two that everyone assumes is on this list, and that is Dracula. You can't say spooky, gothic, autumnal books more than Bram Stoker's seminal work. I adore Dracula. It is a dense read the first time you read it. If you're not accustomed to the epistolary style, because it is told all in letters and diary entries, it does take a moment to get used to it, but once you become accustomed, it is amazing. And I cannot highly recommend Dracula enough. So, do you want to feel like Mina falling in love with Dracula? I know that was mostly a Francis Ford Coppola thing, but I could pick it out in the book. We can make it work. And actually, Siri James, who's a novelist, did a really good Dracula retelling from Mina's perspective that brings in the Dracula and Mina love story and soulmate arc, and I love that for them. Or maybe, like me, you really, really love Lucy. Lucy is more the traditional Gothic heroine in that she's very, very innocent and naive. What she really wants is to love and be loved, and she ends up turning into the monster. I always wished she got a better ending. I've kind of always wished that her and Mina both got to be vampires together, because I think Mina would have made a badass vampire, and all of the like too buttoned up edges that Mina had would have fallen away as a vampire, which would have been really, really fun. But like all great Gothic literature, it makes you wish for different things, and that's kind of the fun. The next book on my list is another vampire tale, and it's one I possibly love even more than Dracula. I've done entire videos on this one, and I've written about it on my blog, and that is Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. I adore this book so much, and it is super short. If you are pressed for time, but you want those spooky, autumnal, witchy feelings that I was talking about at the beginning of this video, this is your perfect choice, because it is so, so short. And it's the story of the titular Carmilla and her romantic interest Laura, and all of the what ifs and the discoveries of Carmilla's vampiric nature. The next one is, again, probably pretty obvious. Not as obvious as the second to last one I'm going to be discussing, but it's still pretty obvious, and that is The Complete Works of Edgar Allan Poe. Everyone who knows me knows I'm a huge Poe fan. I did an entire Edgar Allan Poe theme week for last year's Gothic Romance Week on my blog, because yearly I do a Gothic Romance Week, and yeah, it was one of my favorite theme weeks I've ever done. And in particular, three tales that really give these feels are my favorite story of Edgar Allan Poe's, Ligeia, but also Morella and Berenice have very much that feel that you want. And again, because they are short stories, it's not a large time commitment for you. Next, Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is my really pretty copy. This isn't the, I actually have like the unabridged, unedited version that adds stuff back in because he was a bit censored in his time. But that one is just like a paperback. This is my favorite pretty copy that I own, and it's the story of Dorian Gray and his picture that ages and becomes ugly for the sins he commits, while he remains unflinchingly beautiful. And what is more Gothic fun than that? And this is the other one that I said probably everyone expected to be on this list, and that is, of course, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley's Frankenstein. Of course it's on this list. I love this book. I love Mary Shelley so much. I love the story of her romance with Percy Shelley. I love the story of how this novel was conceived during that famed and infamous summer. So it's great. And I'm also that person who will tell you the real villain of this story, the real monster, is Victor Frankenstein himself, not his creation. Because he's the one who tried to play God, and he's the one that abandoned his creation, and he's the one that sowed those seeds and ended up really causing all the deaths in this book. And then finally, I have 3 in 1 because I only have this in a big, beautiful copy. It is Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, and specifically, I am recommending the first 3. Interview with the Vampire, Lestat, and Queen of the Damned. All 3 of these books are so much the energy of what I was talking about at the beginning, and they sort of have the benefit of being more modern books. If you aren't into reading classic literature and flowery purple prose is hard for you to read, these are a little more accessible. And yes, Anne Rice did write with a very purple prosy style at times, but she was still modern, so her word choices are a little bit more modern and will help balance out any of that confusion you may experience. And yeah, they're amazing. For a long time, up until literally last year, I'd only read these 3. I read them as a trilogy, and I would read them as a trilogy every few years. Last year, I finally did continue on. I'm still not done with the whole Vampire Chronicles series. There's a lot of books, but I've read a lot of them now, and I've obviously, from actually about 5 or 6 years ago, I'd already read the entirety of the Mayfair Witches trilogy, which is an interlocking set. Another great recommendation if you are interested, specifically in the kind of Southern Gothic and ghost story elements, because although they're witch books, there's heavy emphasis on the Southern Gothic ghost story there. But yes, this is one of the greatest series you could read to get those feels that was not published over 100 years ago. So yeah, the story of Louis and Lestat and Claudia, and eventually you get into the story of Akasha and her whole evolution as the Queen of the Damned. Incredible. And like most Vampire Chronicles fans, the Vampire Lestat's my favorite. So I do hope you've enjoyed this short overview of 10 great books to read to feel like you are that sorceress who is taking a break from all of her magic making this season of the witch. If you have enjoyed, please do like, comment, subscribe, and check out my blog, whiteroseofavalon.life, for even more content. Have a wonderful and magical Monday, everyone. Bye now.